Elias Carter woke before the sun rose, as he had every day for as long as he could remember. The faint light of dawn filtered through the wooden window of his modest home, illuminating the weary faces of his mother, Clara, and his younger sister, Lucy. Life in Green Hollow was unforgiving, and for 27-year-old Elias, the burden of supporting his family weighed heavily on his shoulders. The agricultural corporations dominating the region had turned the once thriving village into a barren wasteland, depleting its natural resources and leaving local farmers shackled by exploitative contracts. The house, built by his late father years ago, bore the scars of time and hardship. The walls were frail. The roof creaked with every gust of wind, yet it remained their refuge. Elias had never known any life beyond this one, rising before dawn, laboring to exhaustion, and struggling to find meaning amidst the crushing monotony of his existence. The villagers respected him for his relentless dedication to his family, but deep within, Elias harbored a void that even his love for his mother and sister couldn't fill. As he walked through the dry, cracked fields of his property, Elias gazed toward the horizon, where the towering silhouettes of Titan Agro Corp's factories loomed, visible even from miles away. The corporation controlled not only the supply of seeds, but had also transformed local agriculture into a relentless profit engine, leaving no space for small farmers like him. His father, Henry, had often spoken wistfully of a time when the soil was rich and the community flourished. Now, the land was depleted, and the once vibrant village had become a mere shadow of its former self. By mid-morning, Elias was repairing the fence that bordered the small plot where he grew potatoes. The sound of a strange rustling caught his attention, coming from a remote corner of his land, an area he rarely visited due to its rocky, unyielding terrain. Curiosity led him to investigate, and what he found left him astonished. Amid the stones and dry underbrush, a plant unlike any he'd seen was thriving with an inexplicable vigor. Its leaves were a vibrant green, and its roots appeared unnaturally strong, defying the arid conditions around it. Kneeling, Elias touched the plant with care. As he rubbed a leaf between his fingers, a fresh, invigorating aroma filled the air, as though nature itself was briefly asserting its purest form. There was something extraordinary about this plant. He could feel it. Carefully, he took a small cutting and placed it in his pocket, resolved to study it further. That evening, as night enveloped Green Hollow, Elias sat under the flickering light of a kerosene lamp, scrutinizing the plant. He couldn't explain it, but this discovery felt like more than mere botanical curiosity. Before he could delve deeper into his thoughts, a loud knock echoed through the house, breaking the silence. His mother and sister froze, their apprehensive eyes fixed on him. When Elias opened the door, he was met by a tall man in a pristine suit. The stranger's cold, calculating smile and piercing gaze conveyed an unmistakable undercurrent of menace. "Good evening, Mr. Carter," the man began, extending a hand. "My name is Richard Hayes. I represent Titan Agro Corporation." Elias hesitated before shaking Hayes' hand. The name Titan Agro alone was enough to set off alarm bells in his mind. The corporation rarely sent representatives to the village, and when it did, it was never for anything good. "What do you want?" Elias asked, masking his unease as best as he could. "I've heard you've discovered something unusual on your property," Hayes replied, his calm demeanor almost inhuman. "Something of significant value. I'm here to discuss a potential agreement." Elias' heart raced. How did Hayes know about the plant? He hadn't told anyone. For a moment, he considered lying. But something in Hayes' expression made him realize it would be futile. "I don't know what you're talking about," Elias said, striving to keep his tone firm. Hayes raised an eyebrow, as if he had anticipated the denial. "I hope you'll reconsider. Titan Agro is prepared to be quite generous, Mr. Carter. I'll return soon to continue our discussion." Before Elias could respond, Hayes turned and walked toward a sleek black car parked on the dirt road. The sound of the engine faded into the distance, but the unease lingered. Closing the door, Elias leaned against it, trying to process what had just happened. He knew the plant was special, but he also knew Titan Agro would stop at nothing to claim it. That night, while his family slept, Elias sat at the kitchen table with the plant before him. Taking an old notebook, he began jotting down everything he knew and felt about it. This wasn't just a plant. It was a symbol of something greater, the possibility of change. For the first time in years, Elias felt a spark of hope, though he couldn't yet see how it might ignite. Outside, the wind howled, shaking the fragile walls of the house. But Elias remained steadfast, focused. He understood this was only the beginning of something monumental. It would require courage to face what lay ahead, but for the first time, he felt ready. Elias woke up early, as usual, but the weight of the previous night's events left his mind restless. The encounter with Richard Hayes, a representative of Titan Agro, was not something he could easily dismiss. The corporation wasn't known for diplomacy. On the contrary, stories of their predatory practices were common. For Elias, Hayes' appearance was a clear sign of the challenges ahead. He needed to act quickly, but first, he had to understand what he was dealing with. With the mysterious plant still tucked inside the notebook he had used the night before, Elias made his way to the makeshift workshop he called his shed. Amidst old tools and materials left by his father, he began examining the specimen. He noticed the leaves seemed to react to touch, almost as if they were sensitive to the energy around them. It was strange but fascinating. Crushing one of the leaves gently, he mixed the resulting liquid with water in a small container. The reaction was immediate. The water turned a crystalline, pure color, clearer than anything Elias had ever seen. As he pondered the possibilities, he heard soft footsteps behind him. Lucy, ever curious, had slipped into the shed. "Elias, what are you doing?" she asked, tilting her head as she tried to peek at what he was holding. "Just testing something," Lucy replied, giving her a reassuring smile. "Why don't you head back to the house? It's cold out here." Lucy pouted but complied, running back to join their mother. Elias watched her disappear into the distance, his heart tightening. Everything he did was for Lucy and Clara. But now, more than ever, he felt an overwhelming need to protect not just his family, but also the secret he had stumbled upon, a secret that seemed far bigger than him. Later that day, as he returned to the fields, Elias noticed something unusual. A group of men in suits was walking along the main road of the village, an uncommon sight in Green Hollow. They appeared to be surveying the land, jotting notes on clipboards and speaking in hushed tones. From a distance, Elias recognized one of them as someone who had accompanied Hayes the night before. It confirmed his fears. Titan Agro was moving quickly, and he had to decide what to do with the plant before it was too late. Determined to find answers, Elias remembered an old friend of his father's, Thomas Everett, who lived in a neighboring town. Thomas was known for his expertise in agriculture and botany, having spent years studying plants and sustainable farming methods. If anyone could help him understand the plant, it was Thomas. However, traveling to the town was no simple task. Beyond the distance, there was the risk of being followed. Elias decided to leave at night, using the darkness to travel unnoticed. He explained to Clara that he needed to leave for a few hours and promised to return before dawn. His mother, though worried, nodded reluctantly, knowing Elias didn't make decisions lightly. With the plant carefully wrapped and tucked into his backpack, Elias took his old bicycle and began pedaling along the road toward the neighboring town. The night air was cold, and the usual comforting sounds of nature carried an unease he couldn't shake. At every turn, he glanced over his shoulder, expecting to see the headlights of a car or the shadow of a pursuer, but the road remained empty. After nearly 2 hours of cycling, he arrived at Thomas's house, a modest structure surrounded by a garden that stood out as an oasis amid the region's dryness. Thomas, a man with graying hair and kind eyes, greeted him with a surprised smile. "Elias, what brings you here at this hour?" he asked, guiding him inside. Elias wasted no time and showed him the plant. "I found this on my land. I don't know what it is, but it seems special." And now, Titan Agro knows I have it. They've already come after me. Thomas carefully took the plant, examining it under the light of an oil lamp. His brows furrowed in surprise, and he looked at Elias with a grave expression. "You're right to be concerned," he said at last. "This plant is rare, Elias. Very rare. It appears to be a variation of a species we thought extinct, but with much more advanced properties. If the corporations discover its potential, they'll stop at nothing to get it." "What kind of properties?" Elias asked, his anxiety growing. "I can't say for certain without further study, but from what I can see, it has a potential to regenerate soil in extraordinary ways. This could revolutionize farming in places like Green Hollow or even in desert regions. That's why they're interested. This plant is worth a fortune, but it's also a threat to their business model." Elias felt a mix of hope and despair. The plant could be the solution he and so many other farmers desperately needed, but it also placed him in a perilous position. He thanked Thomas for the information and promised to return soon. Before he left, however, Thomas offered a piece of advice. "If you decide to pursue this, Elias, you'll need allies. You can't take on something like Titan Agro alone." Elias nodded, the weight of responsibility pressing heavier on his shoulders. The journey back was even quieter, but his mind buzzed with thoughts. He knew he had to protect the plant, but he also knew he had to make a decision soon. Titan Agro wouldn't wait long before making their next move, and he needed to be ready. As he reached home with the first rays of sunlight breaking over the horizon, Elias looked out at the barren fields before him. For the first time in years, he felt a spark of hope, accompanied by a growing fear. The fight was just beginning. The days that followed were marked by a growing tension that Elias couldn't ignore. Titan Agro's presence in Green Hollow had become tangible, like a suffocating shadow looming over the village. Transport trucks bearing the corporation's logo began circulating through the region, and the villagers, accustomed to oppression, remained silent. Elias knew Titan Agro's moves were calculated. They were waiting for his next action. As he worked in the fields, his mind was torn. On one hand, fear lingered. Fear of the consequences of his discovery and the veiled threats from Hayes. On the other, the mysterious plan had sparked hope, a chance to transform the village and perhaps even challenge corporate dominance. But Thomas's words still echoed in his mind. "You'll need allies." He knew he couldn't face Titan Agro alone. At dusk, when the fields were cloaked in darkness and the village fell into a deeper silence, Elias made a decision. He needed to speak with his closest neighbors. People who shared the same desperation, but might also harbor a mutual desire for change. Although Green Hollow was fractured by mistrust, Elias believed there were still those who carried the communal spirit his father had often spoken of. His first stop was the Mason family, who had suffered as much as his own. James Mason, the patriarch, was a man of few words but great heart. He opened the door with a look of surprise. "Elias, what brings you here so late?" James asked, gesturing for him to come inside. Elias hesitated for a moment before speaking. "James, I need your help. It's about something that could change everything, but it could also put us in danger." James furrowed his brow, but didn't press for more details. He sat down, inviting Elias to do the same. Carefully, Elias unwrapped the plant and placed it on the table. The lamplight reflected off its vibrant green leaves, and James studied it with a mix of curiosity and concern. "I've never seen anything like this," James said, touching the plant gently. "What is it?" Elias explained what he knew so far: the plant's soil regenerative properties, its revolutionary potential, and Titan Agro's menacing interest in it. When he finished, James was silent, but the determination in his eyes was clear. "They can't get their hands on this," James finally said. "If it's what you say it is, this could be our chance to reclaim what we've lost." With James's initial support, Elias began visiting other neighbors, carefully selecting those he trusted. Sarah Miller, a resilient woman who had managed her farm alone since her husband's death, was the next to join. Then came the Collins brothers, known for their skills in building and repairing agricultural machinery. Each visit strengthened Elias's sense of purpose, but also heightened his fear that Titan Agro might discover their plans. Even with the neighbors' support, Elias knew they were far from having a concrete strategy. He needed more information about the plant and, most importantly, a way to protect it. Each night, he returned to the shed to study its properties, meticulously documenting his findings and conducting simple experiments. The plant's potential was undeniable, but Elias knew time was running out before Hayes or his men made their next move. The tension reached its peak one morning when Elias found a letter nailed to his front door. It was a clear warning from Titan Agro, written in polite but menacing terms. "We are aware of your discovery and reiterate our interest in negotiating a mutually beneficial agreement. Please be advised that reckless actions may lead to unnecessary consequences. Await our contact." A chill ran down Elias's spine. They knew about his movements, and he was certain they were monitoring his land. The letter wasn't just a warning. It was a declaration of war. Despite the fear, Elias realized there was no turning back. That evening, he gathered his group of neighbors to share the contents of the letter and reaffirm his resolve to protect the plant. "This isn't just about us," he said, looking each of them in the eye. "It's about everyone who's been crushed by these corporations. We have something that can make a difference, but we need to be ready to fight for it." Elias's words ignited something in those gathered. It was as if the spark of resistance, long extinguished by hardship, was beginning to reignite. James suggested hiding the plant in a secure location, while the Collins brothers offered to construct a protective structure. Sarah pledged to help Elias transport the plant out of the village if necessary. The group's organization began quietly but efficiently. Each person had a specific role, and they all understood that any mistake could be catastrophic. Meanwhile, Elias maintained contact with Thomas, who advised him on how to document his findings and preserve the plant. Elias also reached out to allies beyond Green Hollow, attempting to connect with researchers and activists who might support their cause. With every step he took, the pressure on Elias grew. Titan Agro was not a force to be underestimated, and he knew a confrontation was inevitable. Yet, as he looked at the group forming around him, he felt something he hadn't felt in years: hope. They were ready to resist, even if it meant standing up to a corporation far more powerful than them. The atmosphere in the village grew heavier with each passing day. Titan Agro's constant presence was no longer a mere intrusion. It was a grim reminder of their power and unyielding control. Yet, amidst the mounting tension, Elias began to feel something stir within him, a sense of purpose ignited by the discovery of the plant. Thomas's advice to seek allies now felt more urgent than ever. Elias knew he couldn't fight this battle alone, but finding others willing to stand against Titan Agro would not be easy. That night, under the starlit sky, Elias gathered a handful of trusted neighbors in his field. Simple men and women, all farmers sharing the same daily struggles, sat in a makeshift circle as he explained what he had learned. He spoke of the plant, its potential properties, and what it could mean for Green Hollow. "They want to take this from us," Elias said, his voice resolute. "But if we let them, we'll remain stuck in the same cycle, the same debts, the same despair." A heavy silence followed as his neighbors absorbed his words. Finally, Peter, an informal leader among the farmers, stood up. "Elias, what you found could be a blessing," Peter said, "but if we stand up to Titan Agro, we'll put everyone at risk. They have money, power, and resources. All we have is our labor and these barren fields." Elias felt the weight of Peter's words, but refused to back down. "I know it won't be easy," he replied, "but if we don't fight now, when will we? This isn't just about me or my family. It's about all of us, about our children, so they can have something better than this." The faces around him reflected doubt and fear, but also curiosity. The idea of challenging the corporation was daunting, yet something in Elias's determination sparked a glimmer of hope. By the end of the meeting, A few neighbors agreed to help, while others chose to remain neutral, afraid of possible retaliation. The following days were dedicated to quiet organization. Elias and his newfound allies worked discreetly, dividing tasks among themselves. Some kept watch on Titan Agro's men, while others helped Elias secure the plant and study its properties. During this time, Elias made a startling discovery. The plant appeared to grow rapidly, even in poor soil. It seemed to possess the ability to transform its surroundings, rejuvenating the land where it was planted. As Elias observed the plant, an idea began to take shape. If they could replicate its effects in other fields, they might be able to prove its value undeniably. However, this would require time and resources he didn't have. That afternoon, as Elias pondered his next steps, Lucy came running across the field. "Elias, there are more Titan Agro men at the village entrance," she cried, her voice trembling with panic. Elias sprinted to the main road, where 2 large trucks were parked. Men were unloading equipment and erecting fences around a nearby field. Standing among them was Richard Hayes, speaking with one of the village leaders. As always, Hayes's posture radiated authority. Elias felt his anger rise. Approaching cautiously, Elias overheard snippets of the conversation. Hayes was promising improvements for the community in exchange for cooperation, a term Elias knew was a trap. The village leader seemed hesitant, but Hayes's persuasiveness was evident. Elias knew that if nothing was done, the village would soon capitulate. "You have no right to do this," Elias shouted, interrupting the conversation. All eyes turned to him, including Hayes's, who greeted him with a cold smile. "Ah, Mr. Carter," Hayes said with unsettling calm. "I see you haven't lost your penchant for causing trouble. We're simply offering the village an opportunity to prosper. Surely that should interest you. Prosper at what cost?" Elias shot back. "Letting you drain what's left of our land? You only care about what benefits you, and once you're done, you'll leave us worse off than before." Hayes didn't respond immediately. Instead, he fixed Elias with a smile that seemed to say, "You have no idea who you're dealing with." "Mr. Carter," Hayes finally said, "you have such a negative view of our intentions. Of course, there are always those who prefer to resist the inevitable. I hope you'll reconsider." Elias stood his ground, glaring at Hayes as he returned to the trucks. When the last vehicle disappeared down the road, Elias knew the situation was escalating. Back at home, Clara awaited him with a worried expression. "Elias, what are you doing?" she asked. "These men, they won't stop. What if something happens to you?" "I can't stop, Ma," Elias replied. "If I give in now, they'll keep doing whatever they want, here and everywhere else. This isn't just about me. It's about all of us." Clara shook her head but said nothing more. Elias knew she was scared, but he also knew he had no other choice. That night, as the village slept, Elias stayed awake, planning his next move. He understood that Titan Agro would not sit idle, and that a confrontation was inevitable. But now, he had something he hadn't had before: allies, few though they were, and the conviction that he was fighting for something greater. The plant continued to grow in his field, a silent symbol of resistance that was just beginning to take shape. Elias knew the days ahead would be difficult, but for the first time in a long while, he saw a glimmer of hope, and he was prepared to do whatever it took to protect it. The next morning brought a heavier, almost suffocating atmosphere. The village was silent, as though everyone was waiting for Titan Agro's next move. Elias knew the company wasn't finished. The trucks that had arrived the previous day were just a beginning, and he could no longer afford to wait passively. With every passing moment, he felt more urgently that he needed to act before control was completely taken out of his hands. Walking through his fields, the distant sound of birds felt out of place, almost like a reminder that, outside Green Hollow, the world carried on as usual. But for Elias, time was running out. He stopped in front of the plant, now taller and stronger than ever. Its roots had burrowed deeply into the soil, and the earth around it was darker, richer. It was impossible to ignore the positive impact the plant had on its surroundings. The regenerative effect was no longer a hypothesis. It was a visible reality. Elias decided it was time to test its true potential. He called Peter and a few other neighbors to help him harvest seedlings from the plant and transplant them to various locations throughout the village. The idea was simple. Spread it as widely as possible before Titan Agro could intervene. The small group worked in silence, each person filled with a mix of determination and fear. They knew that if they were discovered, the consequences could be severe, but they also understood that this was their chance to reclaim control over their land. As they planted the seedlings, Elias outlined his plan. If we can regenerate the soil, even in a small area, we'll have proof that the plant works. That might give us the leverage we need to stand up to Titan Agro. Peter, who had initially been hesitant to support Elias, began to show more confidence. You're right, Elias. We can't keep living as hostages. If this works, it'll be a crucial step forward. As they worked, Elias couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. He scanned the distant fields, but saw nothing beyond grass and trees. Still, his intuition told him that Titan Agro knew more than they let on. That night, after a long day of labor, Elias returned home exhausted. Clara sat on the porch, gazing at the starry sky, as she often did when she was worried. He sat beside her, staying silent for a few moments before speaking. "Ma, do you think I'm wrong to keep going with this?" he asked, breaking the silence. Clara took her time to answer, and when she did, her voice was full of emotion. "Elias, I worry about you. I lost your father to a fight he believed was just, and now I see you following a similar path. But at the same time, I see something different in you. I see hope, something I haven't seen in a long time." Elias held his mother's hand, feeling comforted by her words. He knew she feared for him, but he also knew she understood why he was doing this. The next morning, as Elias checked the fields where they had planted the seedlings, Lucy came running toward him. "Elias, they're coming back. Titan Agro's men are heading this way," she shouted, her voice trembling. Elias felt his heart race, but kept his composure. He ran back to the house and gathered everyone who was available. Peter and other neighbors arrived quickly, forming a small group ready to face whatever came their way. The trucks arrived within minutes, kicking up dust along the main road. Hayes stepped out of the lead vehicle, accompanied by more men in suits who appeared more prepared this time. Seeing Elias and the others gathered, he offered a cold, cynical smile. "Mr. Carter," Hayes began, his voice dripping with sarcasm, "I see you've been making some interesting progress here. Unfortunately, your actions are interfering with our plans. So, we're here to resolve this once and for all." Elias stepped forward, meeting Hayes's gaze without flinching. "You have no right to be here. This land is ours, and we'll decide what to do with it." Hayes chuckled softly, as if he had anticipated this response. "Right, Mr. Carter? It's amusing how you believe you have any authority in this matter. We offer opportunities. You, on the other hand, are merely delaying the inevitable." Before Elias could respond, one of Hayes's men handed him a document. "This is a formal notice. Titan Agro is claiming these lands under contractual rights established years ago with the village. You are in direct violation, and we will take legal action if you fail to cooperate." Elias felt anger rising, but maintained his composure. He knew this was an intimidation tactic, but he also understood they couldn't underestimate the company's power. "You can threaten us all you want," he said, "but we won't give up. What you're doing is wrong, and you know it." Hayes shook his head, as though dealing with a stubborn child. "Very well, Mr. Carter. Consider yourself warned. We'll return soon, and I hope by then you and your friends will reconsider your stance." The trucks departed, but the weight of the threat lingered in the air. Elias knew time was against them, but he also knew they had to keep going. He looked at Peter and the others, seeing in their faces the same mix of fear and determination he felt. They won't stop, Elias said, breaking the silence. But neither can we. We'll keep working, keep planting. And when they come back, we'll be ready. As night fell over Green Hollow, Elias gazed out at the fields and felt something he hadn't felt in years. Courage. The fight was just beginning, but with the strength of the community behind him, he believed they had a chance to win. The dawn brought a sky heavy with dark clouds, as if even the weather could sense the rising tension in Green Hollow. Elias woke to the distant rumble of thunder, and for a brief moment, he wished the storm could cleanse more than just the dry air. Hayes's threats and Titan Agro's looming presence had left deep scars on the community. While some neighbors were ready to resist, many others were visibly shaken. As he prepared to leave the house, Clara stopped him at the door. She held a small cloth bag, her eyes filled with worry. "Take this, Elias. It's all I could gather. I don't know what's going to happen, but I want you to be prepared." He took her hand and tried to reassure her with a smile. "We'll be fine, Ma. We won't let them take what's ours." Despite his words, Elias felt the weight of responsibility with every step he took. When he reached the field where the plant seedlings had been transplanted, he found Peter and the others already at work. The small seedlings seemed to be thriving, and the soil around them was visibly richer and more fertile. It was a silent miracle that gave strength to those who believed in the cause. As they worked, one of the neighbors, Samuel, came running, visibly alarmed. "They're coming back!" he shouted, breathless. "This time they brought more men, and I heard they have excavation equipment." Elias took a deep breath, trying to contain his anger and fear. He looked at Peter, who gave a silent nod. It was clear that Titan Agro was ready to escalate, and they had to be prepared to face them. The group quickly gathered on the village's main road, where Titan Agro's trucks were already arriving. This time, in addition to the men in suits, there were armed security guards and heavy machinery. Amid the commotion, Hayes stepped out of one of the vehicles, his expression as unyielding as ever. "Mr. Carter," Hayes began, his voice dripping with false cordiality, "it seems we've failed to reach an understanding. It's unfortunate, but as I've explained, Titan Agro cannot allow a group of dissenters to stand in the way of progress." Elias stepped forward, his stance firm. "Progress? You call destroying our land and our lives progress? We know what you want, and we won't let you take it." Hayes chuckled softly, as though Elias's defiance was nothing more than a minor inconvenience. "I admire your passion, Mr. Carter, but passion doesn't pay debts. These lands are under contract, and we are well within our rights to claim them." Before he could continue, Elias raised his voice. "These lands are ours, and you have no idea what you're dealing with. Bring your machines, your guards, whatever you want, but we won't back down." The neighbors standing with Elias began murmuring in agreement, forming a makeshift line of resistance. Hayes observed the scene, his irritation barely concealed. "You're making a grave mistake," Hayes said, signaling to the security guards. "Tear down the fences and prepare the ground." The sound of machinery starting up hit Elias like a blow to the chest. He knew they couldn't compete with Titan Agro's resources, but he also knew they couldn't give up. He looked at Peter, who gave him an encouraging nod, and then did something no one expected. He stepped forward, placing himself between the machines and the field. "If you want to destroy our land," Elias said firmly, "you'll have to go through me first." A hush fell over the area. The suited men hesitated. The security guards paused, and even Hayes seemed taken aback. But the hesitation didn't last long. Hayes gave another signal, and the guards began advancing. At that moment, something unexpected happened. Lucy, who had followed Elias without his knowledge, ran out and stood beside her brother. One by one, other villagers began joining them, forming a human barrier in front of the machines. The small group grew, and soon there were dozens of people standing together, united. Hayes frowned, clearly irritated. "Do you really think you can stop this? You're challenging a global corporation. This won't end well for any of you." Elias didn't waver. Maybe it won't end well for us, he replied, but at least we'll know we fought back. That's more than you can say. The confrontation seemed inevitable, but before the machines could advance, a distinct sound echoed down the road. Everyone turned to see a group of vehicles approaching. It was Thomas, accompanied by other farmers and activists from a neighboring town. They carried signs, cameras, and megaphones, immediately beginning to document everything. "We're here to support Green Hollow," Thomas shouted, "and to make sure the world sees what Titan Agro is doing." Hayes hadn't anticipated this. The presence of cameras and witnesses complicated his position. After a tense moment, he raised his hand, signaling the guards to stop. "You've won today, Mr. Carter," Hayes said with contempt. "But don't think for a moment that this is over." The trucks and machinery began retreating, and a collective sigh of relief swept through the group. Elias knew this was only a small victory, but it was a victory nonetheless. As the villagers celebrated, Thomas approached Elias, placing a hand on his shoulder. "You've done something incredible today, Elias. But you need to know, they'll be back, and they'll come back stronger." Elias nodded, still feeling the adrenaline coursing through him. "I know, Thomas, but now we're not alone." He turned to look at the field, where the plants continued to grow, strong and resilient, a silent symbol of the fight they had begun. The temporary victory against Titan Agro brought a new wave of energy to Green Hollow. The arrival of Thomas and the activists from the neighboring town not only boosted their numbers, but also lifted the villagers' spirits. For the first time in years, there was hope, and Elias felt the weight of this newfound responsibility growing with each passing moment. He knew the battle was far from over, and Titan Agro's next move would be even more aggressive. As the days passed, the work of spreading the plant's seedlings continued. The fields began showing visible signs of regeneration. The once barren and depleted soil was regaining color and vitality. Word of the miracle spread quickly to neighboring villages, and more farmers came to see it for themselves. Many offered help, bringing seeds, tools, and, most importantly, their labor. Elias became the unofficial leader of a growing movement, much like the plants they cultivated. He spent hours talking to newcomers, explaining what they knew about the plant and how it worked. Thomas, always by his side, helped coordinate efforts and document their progress. Social media became a powerful tool to share Green Hollow's story, and soon, people from outside the region began paying attention. But Elias knew Titan Agro was watching, too. Late at night, while everyone else slept, Elias sat at his desk, drafting plans and writing down ideas in his notebook. He understood that he needed to anticipate Hayes' next move and ensure they were prepared. In those moments of silence, the weight of responsibility pressed heavily on him. The plant, with all its potential, was not just a solution, it was a target. One such night, he heard footsteps on the porch. Grabbing an old tool as an improvised weapon, he cautiously opened the door. There stood Peter, out of breath, his face etched with worry. "Elias," Peter said, "something's happening on the west side of the village. I think Titan Agro is trying to move in again, but this time they're being more discreet." Elias wasted no time. He called Thomas and a few other trusted villagers, and together they headed to the area Peter mentioned. Under the faint moonlight, they saw vehicles parked near an abandoned field, and men with flashlights appeared to be taking measurements or installing something in the ground. "They're trying to divert attention," Thomas whispered. "They're likely planning another approach to strike where we least expect." Elias nodded. "We need to document this. We can't let them act without consequences." Thomas quickly began taking photos and recording videos with his phone, while the group observed from a safe distance. But before they could leave, one of Titan Agro's men spotted them and began shouting. "They've seen us!" Peter exclaimed, already starting to retreat. "Run!" Elias ordered. The group scattered, and Elias managed to escape through a narrow path leading back to the village. By the time he reached safety, his heart was pounding and sweat dripped down his face. Despite the fear, he knew they had what they needed: proof that Titan Agro was still trying to invade their lands. The next morning, Thomas uploaded the footage to social media. The content quickly went viral, sparking outrage among farming communities and environmental activists across the country. Elias didn't know how far the story would reach, but he understood that every small victory was crucial in sustaining their resistance. As expected, Titan Agro's response was swift and brutal. Just 2 days later, larger trucks arrived in the village, this time bringing heavier equipment and a much larger security force. Hayes was at the forefront again, but now his expression carried visible irritation. "It's over, Mr. Carter," Hayes said bluntly. "You had your chance to cooperate, but you've chosen to challenge a far greater force. I regret that it has to end this way." Elias stood his ground. "Bring all the machines and men you want, Hayes. We're not backing down." Hayes laughed, but this time there was a note of frustration in his voice. "You really don't understand, do you? This isn't a democracy. This is business. And in the end, the strongest always wins." As Hayes spoke, the security guards began setting up a perimeter, pushing villagers away from the areas where the machines were positioned. But to everyone's surprise, the activists and farmers who had arrived in recent weeks began to react. Armed with megaphones, cameras, and even human chains, they formed a barrier between the machines and the fields. The confrontation grew intense. Hayes ordered his security team to forcibly remove people, but the resistance was stronger than he had anticipated. Even under threat, the villagers and activists refused to back down. The tension escalated, and Elias knew something had to be done to prevent the situation from turning violent. Suddenly, a distinct sound echoed across the area. Sirens. Everyone turned to see police vehicles approaching quickly down the road. Someone had called the authorities, and the chaos that was about to erupt was temporarily halted. The police began questioning both sides, but the evidence against Titan Agro was overwhelming. Thomas presented the videos and photos taken the previous night, while the villagers explained what was happening. For the first time, Hayes' air of superiority seemed to falter. After hours of tense negotiations, the police ordered Titan Agro's men to withdraw. Hayes cast one final glare at Elias before leaving. "You may have won today, Carter, but this isn't over." Elias watched as the trucks retreated, feeling both relief and exhaustion. He knew the fight was far from over, but for now, they had achieved something many thought impossible, a significant victory against a powerful corporation. As the sun set over Green Hollow, Elias looked out at the regenerating fields and the people around him. They had risen together, and that unity was more powerful than any machine or threat. The village of Green Hollow was in a rare state of quiet celebration. Titan Agro's temporary retreat meant more than just a victory. It was proof that resistance was possible, even against such a powerful force. Yet Elias knew the battle was far from over. The plant remained at the center of it all, a gift that rejuvenated the land, but also a threat to those who profited from destruction. Elias spent the following days with Thomas and other farmers, analyzing the impact of the seedlings planted across the village. The results were undeniable. Wherever the plant was transplanted, the soil became richer, and crops grew stronger within days. The discovery was revolutionary, but it came with an enormous weight of responsibility. "Elias," Thomas said one evening as they reviewed data in the makeshift workshop, "this could change everything. But we need to take it beyond Green Hollow. The world needs to know what we found." Elias nodded. "I know, Thomas, but that also means exposing ourselves more. And we both know Titan Agro won't back down." They sat in silence for a moment until Thomas spoke again. "If there's one thing I've learned from you, Elias, it's that change only happens when someone is brave enough to risk everything. And you have that courage." That night, Elias made his decision. He knew protecting the village was essential, but he also understood the fight was bigger than Green Hollow. It was time to take the plant and their story to the world. The next morning, Elias gathered the villagers in front of the local church. He spoke with conviction, explaining his decision and asking for their support. "We've come this far together," he began, looking at the faces of his friends and neighbors. And we've achieved something no one thought was possible. But the fight doesn't end here. If we want to protect what we have and ensure no one else goes through what we did, we need to act now. We need to tell our story. Despite their fears, the villagers showed their support. They knew Elias was right. With the help of Thomas and the activists, they began organizing a large-scale campaign to share the plant's effects and expose Titan Agro's actions. Videos were sent to journalists, scientists, and environmental organizations across the country. Social media became a powerful tool, and within days, Green Hollow became the center of a national conversation about sustainable agriculture and corporate abuse. The reaction was immediate. While many supported Elias's cause, others, particularly corporate allies, attempted to discredit the village, calling their claims exaggerated or baseless. But the undeniable visual impact of the regenerated fields drew scientists to Green Hollow to study the plant firsthand. Elias knew they were racing against time. Titan Agro would not stand idly by while the world's attention turned to Green Hollow. And he was right. On a quiet Saturday morning, the company's trucks returned, this time accompanied by lawyers and court officials. They brought a judicial order, claiming the plant was Titan Agro's intellectual property, based on patents they had filed decades earlier. Elias wasn't surprised by the move, but it didn't lessen his indignation. Once again, he gathered the villagers, and with the help of Thomas and the activists, enlisted environmental rights lawyers to analyze the situation. What they discovered was revealing. Titan Agro had manipulated its patents, registering vague and generic information that didn't substantiate their claim of ownership over the plant. Armed with this information, Elias and his allies fought back. Green Hollow's story gained even more traction, and public pressure on Titan Agro intensified. Protests erupted in multiple cities, demanding that the corporation leave the village alone. The final showdown came during a public hearing organized by the regional government. Titan Agro representatives, Green Hollow villagers, journalists, and scientists gathered to discuss the case. Despite his nerves, Elias spoke passionately about the plant's impact on his community and the urgent need to protect the environment from destructive practices. "We're not asking for much," he said, his voice steady as he addressed the crowd. "We just want the right to care for our land, to live with dignity, and to use what nature has given us to build something better, for us and for the world." The response was immediate. Scientists confirmed the plant's benefits, while journalists highlighted Titan Agro's abuses. Public outcry forced the corporation to back down, and under government supervision, an agreement was reached. Green Hollow would retain the right to cultivate and share the plant, provided they followed guidelines to ensure its preservation. When Elias returned to the village that evening, he was greeted as a hero. But he knew the real hero wasn't him or even the plant. It was the community that had united to protect something they believed in. In the weeks that followed, Green Hollow became a symbol of resistance and renewal. The fields flourished, debts were reduced, and the villagers finally felt they had regained control of their lives. Elias, sitting in his old workshop, watched Lucy play among the plants. He knew challenges still lay ahead, but for the first time in years, he felt the future was promising. As the sun set, he picked up his notebook and wrote, "When we fight for something greater than ourselves, we discover strength we never imagined we had. Green Hollow is proof that together, we can change the world."